Morning. It is Friday, November 1st. This is a special meeting of the Darien Board of Education Communications Committee. The next meeting of this committee is December 6th. We have a simple agenda today, which is to discuss the draft communication plan that was introduced at our last meeting. And I will turn it over to you, Dr. Adley.
Good morning. Good morning, John. So today we were just to look at some feedback and in particular, just a couple of things, just what has the administration done since the last meeting. We did not have to do too much, but we were asked to, is Mr. Maroney on actually? Just curious.
He's not.
He's not, okay. So we were asked to list resources, if there were any resources necessary for the strategy, so we can go through that. We were also to update the communications tool, which originally was on page 12. And we have attached a separate document, which is just this page sort of blown up a little bit so as you can read it. The actual communications tool, there's a PDF of it there so you can actually read it. I want to thank Marge because we've been doing the communications tool off and on for quite a bit of time. And with Marge's epiphany and suggestion here, I think we landed in a much better place with the format. Much better place. I will say that it follows a format that we have looked at in the past, which is Stanford. I actually spoke to the Stanford superintendent to say that we actually liked your format. If you have any problem with format ways, we just use the general style because I think it actually, in general terms, it sums things up nicely. We tried to cover as much of the areas and topics that we have without going crazy, but it gives essentially people a sense of how to sign up or how we push stuff out. So we can look at that separately if you would like to do that. And other than that, there's whatever comments or questions that are coming from the actual committee. So I'm happy to do whatever way we want to do it, but those are the updates. And
that sounds great. Thank you. Maybe do we want to start with, so I know we did a little general reactions in our last meeting, but if anybody has any other kind of overall thoughts that they want to share, and then we can go through sort of section by section. I have a few little things and a few, I don't know, bigger things for discussion. Go ahead,
I just at a more of a high level overall thoughts. I'm really trying to be cognizant of the amount of additional work that we are potentially creating, especially in strategy number 2, because it's the number of potential proposed meetings that I think might be a little more than what we should be doing just for the from the administration's standpoint, because we already have a pretty hefty level of existing, not only Board of Education meetings, but the existing town halls that we already do. And so that to me was one area that I think we need to, I mean, this is a great list if we had all the resources and the people whose job it was to do all of this. But I think we should probably take a little bit more baby steps initially so that we don't create more burdens on time aside from running our schools. That's just a high level kind of comment.
Yep.
And social media, I think that was the only other kind of, and it kind of goes through the whole document.
Yep.
The parents and staff both said that they did not prefer social media. And so my personal view would be that maybe at this point in time, we don't dedicate additional resources exploring the use of social media. And I that would just be my personal view based on the feedback.
Okay.
I mean, I would, in the same vein, just in terms of looking at like not just the scheduling of what's happening with strategy number 2, but also as it relates to communications, just generally like laying out like what are the number of different communications that we're actually sending out? Because I receive a lot being in 2 schools, and I know that there's a lot of overlap in those, just to make sure that as we're thinking about what the go forward plan is, that there's not duplicative stuff that may cause it may be counterproductive because people get burdened with too much. So just thinking about that as well.
Excellent. One thought that I'd like us to keep in our heads as we kind of walk through this in a little more detail is I just want to make sure that we have enough in here to help improve communication between faculty or staff and home. Because that was something that we heard about and we've talked about some, and there is some in here. I want to make sure that we keep
Yeah,
that in
and Julie, I
mind.
forgot about that, the two-way communication
Yes.
piece, I feel we're not adequately necessarily addressing some of the feedback. And that had to do with, especially more at the level of the Middlesex and Darien High School,
Mhm.
you know, how do parents have that two-way feedback
Right.
with the staff? And then likewise, we had staff feedback that they would like the Board of Ed to listen to the feedback of teachers and coaches. That was one of the little bubbles on the survey. And
Right.
I don't know where that occurs right now either. So I think that to me would be something that we still maybe need to explore a little bit more. And I'm not sure of the correct way to do that. And then kind of along those lines was the Google Classroom was mentioned as a tool, but there were things that they said were being done in Google Classroom, which maybe this is happening at the elementary school level where teachers are giving email summaries of students' progress. But for the Middlesex and Darien High School students, it's been my experience that parents don't get any of that information, nor do we have access to our students' Google Classrooms.
Okay.
So if that's not the case, and I think that the communication tools section, that tab, maybe needs to be updated so that it is either clarified that that's only for elementary, or also giving what the access is for parents at the middle school and high school level. Because I don't think Google Classroom is intended to be used by parents at that level. And maybe I'm incorrect. I think
Yeah.
Aspen, maybe they use it a little bit better.
I don't know if some parents access their students' Google
might.
Classrooms. I think you can, your
If your
student can give you
Gives you their,
access. I'm not a parent
Yeah,
that goes
I know.
into the Google Classroom, so I can't speak to that.
and I think that maybe had to do more with promoting student independence,
Uh-huh.
which we also want to do. But
course.
I think if I'm a parent and I'm looking at this, you don't want to set expectations about something that maybe we're not intending to do.
Right,
And that
right.
was the only concern I had there.
Awesome.
And Dr. Hadley, on that point, in terms of like the parent faculty communication, do you have any like thoughts in terms of like where we are to, because it's a little bit different for each grade level, like elementary versus middle school versus high school. And like, I know like, I don't have any kids in high school, so I don't really have any view on that, but like middle school is obviously a lot different than elementary school, where you go in a meeting with your teachers like fairly regularly. In the middle school, it seems like it's more just like, I'm available if you want to send me an email. I just don't know if parents actually do that. I don't really email the teachers all that much. So any like preliminary thoughts, and then like, I don't even know where we would, like how we would attack that.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't want to overcommit to attacking it, to be honest with you. So I would have to, I'm just looking down at the bullets that we have. Is there anything in there that actually allows us to process-wise look at that and see if there's any other areas of communications that we need to do or not do? I'm looking down at this list of 1 to 10 type
Yeah.
thing.
You know what, Dr. Adley, one potential comment is a strategy might be these, we do talk about, having departmental town halls or
Yes.
presentations, for instance, on different parts of our curriculum. I think that is something that it's a great idea. I don't necessarily think that we're doing that other than at the elementary level, maybe as well as we could. So for instance, in English, having some kind of a brown bag lunch or like something for parents where they could get more of an in-depth overview than you're able to get at the open house, for instance, on, here's what we're covering, or, and EduPlanet right now, it says that there's a link on the website, but the district website, at least from what I've been able to find, doesn't currently have anything accessible for EduPlanet. So, I mean, maybe the intent is that this is
Right.
our future blueprint, but I know EduPlanet ideally would give parents that access to, here's the curriculum, here are the titles we're reading for these courses. Currently, it's not in our course descriptions. But I think some of the parents' desire for more feedback is exactly that. It's to kind of understand what their kids are going to be learning in those certain courses. What are the books that they're going to be reading? And maybe in the absence of having that available right now in EduPlanet, maybe we have something that's more of a, here's an overview of our social studies kind of curriculum for our 10th graders. And it's not a parent-teacher conference, but it can kind of address some of the, maybe a little bit more of what they're learning. Or maybe we do that better at the open house. That's just a,
Well,
Yeah, because the open house is, I mean, I just did this like a month ago, whatever. It is like, I mean, you have like 10 or I don't know how many
Yeah.
minutes, 8 minutes or something
Right.
in each classroom. And the teachers are like speaking as fast as they can. And then it's like the bell rings and all of a sudden like, all right, run to the next one. And you're like sprinting to the next one. Maybe there is
or a handout.
how much
Here's
can you
our
get out of that? I don't know.
skeleton outline. This is what we're going to cover. And they can just hand it out because they don't have time to talk to it necessarily. I don't.
Because otherwise, I don't disagree with the idea of like having a town hall or something, but then that creates more work.
It does create work.
So that's the flip side to,
Yeah.
That's what we keep bumping into, isn't it?
yeah.
So the parent conference presentation workshops, there would be sort of that is intended to, in a way, extension into those areas that you're possibly talking about.
Right.
And along with, if I have,
I think we're doing it relatively well right now. So they did that parent presentation on the K-3 literacy, that was well attended. They are doing things periodically, I think, in areas that are important to parents.
yeah, so the idea there would be to expand that conceptually into some of those other areas. Greg, your specific question gets a wee bit more complicated in the sense of both politically, practically, what is the push out from, or what is the two-way communication for like a parent with a teacher? Like, what are those modes of communication from the middle school, elementary school, and high school? And extrapolating that you might want more or different ones. That takes a different, that is a completely different, non-quick process to evaluate. Because that's a specific thing right there. Like, we'd like to be looking at the modes of communication. Like, let's say we said, I'm just making this up. Let's say you said, well, we would want to hear from the, I don't know, high school teachers. We would want to have conferences for high school teachers, right? That's a good that could be one mode of communication. Well, there's like, I can't just say those things, right? Because there's contractual stuff, there's other, and then just let's say you just wanted, I don't know, middle school. We want a weekly email from a parent or something if something's going on. A, I don't know what we would want, but B, just to even get to that discussion is just it's a deeper process and a complex process, involves many, many people. I don't know if philosophically, is that kind of what you're talking about in the sense of would like to look at those modes of communication from teachers back and forth? Is that actually what you're asking? I think it's what you're asking, but if it is, I have to share like that is a huge sort of, but you could be leaning in and going, oh no, but that's what part of this is all about. So
That's what I was going to say is like at the middle school level in particular, where like, I don't know, that may be the 3 years, which are the hardest growing pains, not just for kids, but for parents in terms of independence, like the ability for your kids to start getting independence. Well, you go from 5th grade where it's a lot of handholding to 6th grade where suddenly you don't know what's going on. And I think parents start to freak out a little bit, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's just designed intentionally that way.
Is there an opportunity, Dr. Adley, with a new principal at the helm at Middlesex? I've already heard anecdotally that some things that are different. I think I could say I've heard some things that are better. And maybe as part of an update that Ms. Demoulas would be bringing to us, she could talk a little bit about what she's seeing, about how things are working well, or where she sees room for improvement, which could touch on communications. Is that a way to start a conversation about that that comes kind of out of the right place?
Or just one building off of that, I know in the past, a prior Middlesex our principal, in the weekly email to parents would go team by team and say, the blue team in science did this, whatever, and, the English was doing this. And so each team, for the parents, at least, it would give kind of an overview about what each team was covering just from a you know, this was the week and this was the subjects and this is what we did. And it was a pretty relatively brief thing, but it was actually a nice update for parents just because they're not getting that kind of feedback and involvement on a more frequent basis. I think Shelley used to do that.
I don't know if this is the place to bring
Okay.
I don't know that this is the forum to bring a principal to talk about the communication of the middle school, to be honest with you.
I meant it as part of an update to the full board.
Oh,
If there's a piece where that, just to touch on it, you know, fresh eyes. I don't know if that's, I don't think.
The only
it's on
thing I would say
master agenda,
about that is, okay, well, now we're rolling into a specific, if we were rolling into a specific domain, like the middle school, for instance, for a particular reason, or is it attached to this?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a
I
sense of like.
understand.
because
You're right.
Because it'd
That's
be
fair.
misunderstood as to why
Yeah.
are we doing this, right?
Well, maybe we keep walking through this and let's
Yeah.
keep that in mind and keep the conversation going that way, if that's okay. I did just back at the top line, kind of overall, I just wanted to say again that I do think this is a nice combination of capturing what's happening presently and also including some things that we want to start doing. A few of them might be a little aspirational right now, and I think we should talk through that as we go through them, but I like that. I think it's very responsive. I think it is easy to understand. I like the format very much. So,
I like it too. I think it's a great start. I just
you.
want to make sure we're not burdening you.
yeah.
Thank you.
On the intro, purpose and principles, communication tools. Anybody have anything on there? This is a little thing, but on the purpose and principles, I might like to reorder those bullets. Protecting the privacy of students and families felt funny at the end. To me, that's kind of a, if nothing else, we must protect the privacy of students and families. So I would just suggest that we put that at the top, but not a strong feeling. And then the other piece I wanted to touch on here is striving for transparency. We've talked a fair amount about, has the word transparency lost a little of its meaning and becoming such a buzzword? And would we be better served to more define what we mean that striving for clarity and straightforwardness, or simple, you know, keep communications simple and clear. Does anybody?
It's just listed like that because that's the language
way
that
we
we
said.
actually ended on when we distilled everything and then went to the policy committee.
It comes up again later. Maybe later is a better place to look at kind of dimensionalizing that a little more. Okay. Do you have a thought, Greg?
I don't know. I mean, you could. Transparency, I understand what it means and all that, but maybe it's like, to me, it's almost more like the communication is being proactive instead of reactive.
Okay, so that's different. Probably, right?
A lot of times there's things that get brought up or get brought to our attention reactively, and if it had been addressed preemptively, then
Mm-hmm.
there would be no issue.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I think that idea is captured later in the strategies. So let's just make sure we note that when we get there.
Yeah, and I think I don't have a problem with in this area putting striving for transparency. I think to me, what that means really is having things being accessible and clear,
Okay.
especially in terms of curriculum. And I think that's the biggest piece that we've had feedback, that parents want more accessibility to understand what actually is happening or what's being taught.
Gotcha. The communication goal. Pretty straightforward. It is the communication goal.
Yeah.
So on research and best practices in communication, Dr. Ali, can you just tell us a little bit about where these were? I think they're great, where they were all pulled from, just
Well, essentially, it's distilled.
lift.
It's
Uh-huh.
distilled from the research that they give the basics. They give the basic citations there. We have which one am I looking for? Hanover Research, for instance, contribute to the social media one, which doesn't apply to us just as much. We did actually look at synthesis of Harvard research, research from Hanover on best practices. And honestly, this was the one that made the most sense to actually discuss, right? That we aren't doing as
Okay.
much as we might. Others were from the citations. I did use, in all transparency, a wee bit of AI to help me with this, but the citations are there.
Yep. Okay.
And that's in number 6, the transparency and accountability. So I
Yep.
mean, again, I think that that word is it's used pretty frequently in this kind of thing, I think.
Yep.
I think it's helpful just at least just when you touch on it, like, does the plan touch on this in any way? Even if it's to say, well, yes, social media, we recognize, but we've made a decision. We're not aggressively, pursuing it as much as we might want to or not want to. And I think it also sort of captures some of the principles and some of the things that. So to me, I'd be looking at this and going, is there anything there that would push us in a different way, or are we hitting on those in general, or that type of thinking?
Yep. Okay, thank you. I think it's a helpful, informative page.
I
It's
like
just
the
a lot of
page. Yeah,
information.
Yeah, it's just a
Um,
question of like, so for social media, to your example, I mean, I agree, yes, it can be used very well, but
mhm.
I think we have to think about what has the feedback been from our
Right.
parents and staff, and maybe this is a very initial step in
Right.
my mind, so it's just a question.
For sure. Jill, you want?
Yeah, I think looking at whether it belongs in best practices or principles, I think the timeliness of communication is something that's changed drastically. That's why we're talking about social media, for example. That's kind of embedded in what Greg is saying about proactively communicating, but it's also a conversation we've had in terms of not receiving 17 emails on a Friday from 17 different stakeholders. So I think somewhere we need to capture, because it's changed drastically, right? It used to be that communication could happen in a relatively slow cadence. Our board meetings were sufficient. But today that's not the case. So whether you capture it as a best practice
Yeah.
or whether it's a principle, I think it's an important concept.
Thank you. Yep.
And just one thing on number 3, two-way communication. So the last sentence, parent surveys often indicate they want opportunities for meaningful dialogue with school staff. And I think that, that's a best practice in terms of what the research has found. And I guess I understand your point, Dr. Edley, about, how you operationalize that is a very different question, and that can be significant in terms of staff time. So I'm not sure what the best avenue is for this. And, I would leave that to you and your staff to figure out how we could do that better, maybe.
This is a form over substance, but I think you said that Dennis said it has to include the sources in each one. I think it's a little bit dense, just in terms of like the amount of words. I don't know if I would almost think about putting it to the right or something.
Sources?
Yeah.
Source? No, he actually asked me for resources.
Oh, resource.
What it would take to do
Resources for
something.
each
Oh,
of them.
okay.
You see under the strategy, some of them have a resource, some of them haven't. It was our
I
way of
understand.
responding to that. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, current engagement. So 31 people have participated in Board of Ed meetings since September. Does that mean like board members or presenters, or that means that's how many people have been on the Zoom?
It's really the Zoom.
It's participants.
Wow, that's a low number to me.
That is low.
They just took a snapshot of the September.
Okay,
Oh.
okay. Okay, so that's not that many, and it's sort of a busy time of the school year for people.
Well, this is also helping us go down the metrics of keeping these metrics, to be
Uh-huh.
honest with you.
That's great
And that's
to
part of it.
capture this.
The YouTube is pretty big, which is
Yes,
interesting. So I think maybe more people are watching, but they're not trying to interact,
Right.
which is what they would do on Zoom.
right. And watching on their schedule,
Right.
which is part of what that's all about, right? Is
Yeah.
to make it available to people when they're available. Okay. Survey data and qualitative feedback. We had talked about making sure we thought these were the right bits to include and that it was clear. I thought this page looked great. that the quotes were good. And I felt the same way about the staff one. Anyone have any thoughts on those? No, we're good. The conclusions, clear. And the visual identity piece, concise and clear. Okay, communication tools.
So again, this one has been updated since we last spoke, and we went to 3 columns to simplify it. There's a couple of things that we tried to pursue. One of them was the Google Classroom, just to lean into that a wee bit. So we just had that wee discussion. We put in, I'll just put a couple of things that may be of interest to people or otherwise. We put in Blue Wave Athletics because that's a big thing, right, in terms of the athletic programs and how do we share information, push information, receive information back. We have some curriculum updates and presentations there. We actually put in the Darien Student Newspaper just as a student voice to push out a little bit. I know it's a simple a wee example, but it's also beginning to think in that capacity a little bit. That was a conscious decision to put in a wee bit of, is there something from a student voice type thing we could put in or not put in? The rest of them, I'm happy to talk about any of them, but we tried to sort of, we actually put in CDSP. The CDSP, I didn't put in CDSP from a point of view, this is a board thing. I put in CDSP from a point of view of how the administration and the board communicates with CDSP. Primarily to that committee, we actually try to attend. There's a representative from the board, and I try to attend where I can. Mostly I get there at the end of it to give an update or listen to people, but that's the way we sort of like currently work with full CDSP organization. Then of course we have we organize the monthly PTO meets. So I left that there for well, that's the reason why we put it in.
Just one question. I do think the PTOs at the school level also maybe should be on this list because parents are getting a lot of communication from their individual schools. I know that the CDSP is the umbrella for all of those, or maybe it's within that CDSP bucket and you just delineate that the school level PTOs also are communicating. Because that's where I think every parent at those different levels are getting a weekly email and a lot of their information.
Yeah, and
But-
I was gonna touch on the same thing, slightly different approach, but there's the superintendent messaging, there's principal messaging, there's PTO messaging, there's CDSP messaging, and sometimes one goes out and then another one is different, and a third one is different, and the actual positioning of some of the things that are being said are not the same. I don't know if we don't really have oversight of the PTO or the CDSP, but they are sending blast emails to a lot of the same people. So all of a sudden you've got 4, 3, 4, 5, 6 communications all in a short period of time. And sometimes they are inconsistent, which creates confusion of which one are we supposed to pay attention to?
So there was discussion among this committee for a wee bit of time around this topic, and around the topic was relatively, let's not put the CDSP on the list. Right now, I have put it consciously on the list just from the point of view, when that's pushed out, you could say it's coming from the school, but we were confining what our role was in our communications. It's not our communication, say. So we weren't listing it as our communication. Let's not put down here as a format. And it can actually be a good thing, confusion thing, or otherwise. I just put on here how the district, from a point of view of central office administration, primarily myself, although occasionally I would bring another staff member with me, and the board communicates to the CDSP population. So if it's sort of meant to be a compromise and just we can completely take it out, we can add in the
That's a really good point. I think I agree with what you're saying.
But
Yeah.
so like an example, I'm going to use an example, and this is, I don't, this isn't intended of being inflammatory, but it is an example that I remember from the budget season. So some of the board members were like, I'm surprised that nobody has stood up and said anything about the topic of athletics, which was a key topic in terms of like starting to charge athletics. And when I went back and read like the PTO emails and the CDSP emails, like it was never mentioned, but there are other things that were highlighted. So it was like selective highlighting of issues within the budget by those groups. So that's a form of communication that's not really in our control, but it does impact the board and it does impact the administration and how we think about things and deliver messages.
So in some, and not explicitly for that example reason, but that's one of the reasons why the CDSP is putting their materials out. It's not necessarily it sort of is if we're sending it out like as a vehicle to read, but essentially what they're saying is not condoned or otherwise through, and it's not really part of this process. And not, anyway, I'm being repetitive at this.
I would, specifically to that example, I would liken it to the media. We don't have oversight of what the media is going to run or say. And it's not really within our control. We
Right.
can try to influence what the messaging will be by trying to get out ahead of it. So I would say if the feeling is there have been inconsistencies, we can look to what has come from this room and this table to see how clear and concise and straightforward it is, and see if perhaps things are getting lost from one step to the next. And I think some of this work is intended to make that simpler, to try to have summaries of what's decided and what's being discussed and what the big questions are. I'm not certain how I feel about having CDSP on here. I certainly understand what the role is, and I understand why you put it on here, Dr. Adley. I think it's worth a discussion, but I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that everything that's listed here is something that is our tool to manipulate and manage.
Yeah, that's what I said before. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
we don't really have, I don't think we necessarily have oversight. We don't have oversight of the PTO. I don't know if we do, of PTO and CDSP, but they are taking our communications and putting them out there in their own manner, whatever that is. So that does like potentially create an issue where there's different communication. So I'm like, when I was looking at this, that's what was in my head was like, okay, well, we send out emails, that's one form of communication, but if there's also the website, if we wanted to get people to go look at one source of that communication, you'd put it on a website that can't change, can't be forwarded, can't be copy and pasted. Something, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
I can screenshot just about anything. So
Yeah, but then,
So,
someone's got to go.
well, anything that's out there can be forwarded. I mean,
Right.
pretty much. I think we just all have to live with that.
I'm just thinking
reality.
like, is there, we send out a lot of emails. So I've even seen like between like Dr. Adley's superintendent versus the middle school, different messaging. Now that's like, okay, how do we make sure that even our own communications are consistent? But when you have lots of communications, there's just bound to be inconsistencies.
And again,
I have this on here just in the bigger spirit of a communication plan and working with people, and our parents are a huge contingent, right, stakeholders, and ones that we rely on and collaborate with. We don't always agree with, like the particular organization, we don't always agree with, that's fine. But I just put it in the sense of how do we outreach, two-way communication? This is the way we outreach. And this is another way formally that we listen, that we participate in, right? And we support. Beyond that, we're not making commentary on what is sent out, not sent out, even sending anything out.
I appreciate what you're saying. And I mean, from that standpoint, the way that you have outlined it on this, I think is maybe effective to that point. But on the strategy piece, maybe as part of the strategy of understanding the role of the BOE, which is strategy number 1, maybe more explicitly, we could kind of talk about, working with or interfacing with, or how there was a suggestion on there about having town halls or something with the Board of Ed and the community from this standpoint, the Board of Education and interface with the CDSP potentially would help to achieve that strategic kind of that goal about helping people to understand the role of the Board of Ed.
Is like somebody from the Board of Ed specifically responsible for communicating with the PTOs and the CDSP to make sure that the communications are aligned before they send stuff out, or are they just going and doing whatever? they
No,
wanna
there's
do?
that's
No.
independent. Yeah. The
They're
CDSP
independent
is
by design.
independent.
Yeah.
But what I was talking about in strategy number one, I was talking about understanding the work of the Board of Education. Maybe that part of that strategy is that the Board of Education can help clarify, some of the common misunderstandings or misconceptions about the role of the Board of Ed to the CDSP so that then they can kind of help to educate their parents. Why does the Board of Ed never respond when I give public comment? Why, and there are a lot of different misconceptions about various things. And maybe that's a way that communication could be achieved as opposed to having to have a separate town hall with parents.
I feel like the CDSP population probably understands
They
the
do.
work of the Board of Education better than
Well, the group.
a lot
But
of,
not the parents, yeah.
a lot of the parents.
Yeah.
Again, I think a lot of the things we're talking about are things that this work in its
You're right.
entirety are intended to address. So I don't think that
Right.
at each stage we can suddenly eliminate one email from one person or correct any inaccuracies or differences in whatever positioning from another organization. So I don't want us to get caught up in that for this conversation. I think the CDSP conversation is probably whether or not we include them here, and probably something that should be decided by the board instead of this committee. Jill, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I think it's fine. The committee, I would say, should probably recommend one way or the other, and then that's fine for the board to decide. But I think if you're going to have parent groups on there, then we need to look more holistically at parent groups. I know CDSP is the only one that represents the entire universe of parents, to my knowledge. But we do have other parent organizations where there are formal relationships with administration.
Like
They do
CPAC.
have a communication piece, CPAC or DAG or potentially others. So I think that if this is, if it is one of the tools, then the relationships with parent organizations needs to be fully articulated.
Mhm.
Julie?
Yes.
Just one, on that point, maybe in the communication tools section, there's a separate one that is parent groups. And we just list out the parent groups and kind of the interface that they have. So it's CPAC or CDSP or DAEG. And that's not all inclusive, or Music for Youth. There are different, things that's for a newcomer to Darien, just having that outlined, that this is not a district tool, but these are parent groups that have to do with these areas. Maybe
I think
that's
that'd be really
a
helpful.
helpful guide for parents.
Yeah, but I want to be very clear, I think we should be very clear. This purpose of this is to tell them how we enter, we
Good
maybe
point.
summation of it, but how we interact with the community. And if there's
That's
certain
a-
parent groups are
yeah.
part of it, you can certainly capture generically that theme, but it would be like how we
Out of the
interact with
boundary,
it. It would be
I guess.
limited in the sense of what we would say.
Oh, yeah, but I think that that's an important communication is
Yeah.
to make the public parents educated in terms of what are board communications and what are not.
Right.
And just identifying them as different and not us makes it clear. And so that when I get a PTO email, I don't think that this is the administration or the board. This is a different group of people, CSP, the same thing, and whatever those other groups are. I think it'd be very helpful so that people aren't confused and think that that's coming directly from us or the administration or otherwise.
So are we suggesting that we want to capture somewhere other parent groups, just to make sure I'm getting the message? I also don't want this to turn into a document that lists out a bunch of
Okay.
meetings and conversations you're required to have on a monthly basis with with all the local special interest groups in town, because that's not doable
I think
either.
the only guidance invariably or decision verbally would be, I could put it under other community organization and groups, right? I mean, I'm not going to list them all.
Yeah.
But how do we interact with
Mhm.
the administration or the board or both? Like, how do we interact with these groups that serve our kids well? So the only thing would be, would I separate it out as the CDSP one, or just keep it in that, all group it just all together? Probably group it together.
I think I would group it together.
Since we're
Um,
going to expand it, I can group it together. Be generic.
Yeah, I would put them in a separate bucket, not baked into all this other stuff
Mhm.
that's like this, as Robin has suggested.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that. Our recommendation is to group it all together. Okay.
And those are a couple of we highlight, like as to like what was different about this, and was there any particular reason you put one thing over another?
Mhm.
This is really helpful.
Dr. Adley, is there an opportunity when in looking at Aspen or looking at a different, I know there's going to be an exercise to consider a different student information system. A lot of these say if you have an email in Aspen, you're on the distribution list. Is there a way to make that more sophisticated? Could, Greg opt in to weather information, but not get the emails about building whatever meetings? I don't know. Moving forward, and we may not know the answer to that question, but is that something that we could look at? Because I think there probably are some people who want some information, but not all of it. And if there's an opt-in, opt-out to offer them, that could help manage that.
Well, I think as the technology department look at the pros and cons of Aspen, this is Aspen at the moment, Aspen versus another system, they would have to take into consideration, how are we using it right now? Do the parents have the facility to be selective in what they receive or what they sign up for or not? I believe that they do, but I would have to confirm that.
Yeah.
But certainly that could be part of the discussion.
Add that to something to look at, I think would be helpful. Again.
But some of those things are sort of not buried, but included in the strategies and actions that we're going to try and do. This is just simply saying what's in place and what are we doing right now. And
Thank you. Any other topics and communication tools?
Just again, on EduPlanet and the curriculum piece. Right now, EduPlanet, when I looked, was not accessible. I don't think there was a link to it specifically. So I don't know the timing
I'll
of when
check
that
it.
would
I'll
occur, but we
check it.
should just make sure that this is current, or it talks about a future link or something.
I
think
thought the
there-
link was live, but I'll double check.
And I think there is an EduPlanet update coming to the
Right.
board in the
Right.
not too distant future. So that will.
I just
hopefully
looked in the
answer.
curriculum
I
tab
did
in the
too.
teaching and learning, and I couldn't find anything. So it just, to the extent that we're going to make this public document, I think that just needs to be clarified.
Okay. We good here? I liked the near ad inclusion, by the way. I wish I read the
Pardon?
near ad. I like the near ad inclusion.
Okay.
I don't read the near ad as often as I should.
I have one more question, as I saw. For elementary school, I think there's still a policy to not give tests back to students.
You're talking about the actual, probably the assessments, the
No, like even like my kids, oftentimes they say I have a test, and then I say, hey, did you get the test back? And they say, no, we found out how we did, but we don't
Yeah, I
get the
think we're-
test back.
I think we've touched on that and the years gone by. That's probably that is a topic probably for discussion at some point, not necessarily at this table.
Some of them, they've actually, like my son is in 5th grade now, and he's actually now started to get them. His teacher actually told us in our conference that he was going to give them back to them. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is
Sorry, what was that
different.
last?
That they were going to start giving the test back.
They were
to the
going to
kids.
start giving them back?
Yeah, she was like, we're going to give the test back to the kids. I was like, this is great. So then they can see what they got wrong. And
I won't talk
Get it better.
casually about it, but and I'm sure there's historical or other reasons for that, but giving an assessment back for learning seems to be a pretty reasonable request.
Can you add that as an action item request at the next meeting?
Sure.
I think Alan's right. That's a different discussion.
well, I view
but
that as a
it's-
form of communication.
Yes, it
Oh, yeah,
is. And I understand why you,
Yeah, yeah. That's why I brought it up.
I understand why you've raised it here.
Yeah,
Because I understand that it's a form of communication, but I think there's
we can, yeah, I'll make sure.
a bigger discussion around it as well.
Yep.
Okie dokie. Chain of communication. probably due for a reprint at some point, the chain of communication. It's tiny. It's so
Oh, no,
hard
this,
to
this is
read.
only, this is only in here just to keep this to,
It's as a placeholder. We're gonna
Well-
make it a larger font. at some point.
oh, do you want a larger font? This was just in here to show the organization of it a wee bit, but if we got,
No,
yeah, we
I
probably should make it bigger anyway.
I mean, it has looked like this in all my years at the Darien Public Schools. So I'm just saying, at some point, it's probably ready to be reset on the way
The
it's
good news
typeset,
is it's
but,
updated.
oh, I believe that. But no, I think it's helpful. I mean, I think it needs to be here. I think this is an incredibly important tool that gets forgotten sometimes. So I appreciate that it's there. Okay, communication strategies. Number 1, engage the community in understanding the work of the Board of Education.
Again, these strategies came out of all the feedback to try and distill the stuff, and looking at sort of like, okay, so what could we, what do we need to address moving forward, communication wise?
Yes, Rob?
Okay, so my question is really on number 5. To some extent, I think that this really should just be included in strategy number 2, where we're doing the town hall forums, because for the most part, the Board of Education is doing oversight of what are district level initiatives, which I think we do try to do town halls around. So I'm questioning having a number 5 in here specific related to the work of the Board of Education, because I don't know what topics we would be addressing specifically if we did a town hall forum just about the work of the Board of
Hang
Education.
on, what are you actually referring to, Robin? I'm looking at strategy. You said strategy 5, is that what you said?
I'm looking at action number 5.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
you've started the strategy
Oh,
one.
on
Okay, all right.
sorry, well, that's what was up on the screen.
Strategy 1, action
Sorry.
5.
Action 5.
Engage the community in focus groups and town hall forums. And you're saying that's probably more of a strategy 2, two-way communication with all stakeholders.
Correct, because what the Board of Ed ultimately is an oversight organization, and what we're overseeing is the district level initiatives. So I don't know if this came out of specific parent survey feedback specifically about the Board of Education. That was just really my question. And again, this is also with the goal of trying to eliminate other meetings,
Thanks.
because we already do a lot of meetings that are all publicly available,
Right,
recorded, et cetera.
right, live and recorded.
I think you mentioned that there was going to be some tracking of number, which I think is a good idea, of like attendees for board meetings. Is there an ability, I've seen this in a business setting, is there an ability to track how many people out of, like, when you send the weekly superintendent or you send the middle, like all those communications that we have, is there an ability to track the number of people that actually open and read them?
Yes.
Yeah, we track.
Because that might be
through it.
another interesting thing, but as we're thinking about, is there a way to consolidate some of these communications? If there's one, we look at them and we're like, wow, this one's getting a 90% hit rate, this one's a 10% hit rate, maybe the 10% goes away. I'm just making it up, but it could be informative.
Yeah. Robin, your question, I think is like, are we embedding 5 in number 2 somewhere or otherwise?
It's in there,
It
sort
is
It's
of.
in there,
there.
sort of like.
2, number 2.
Number 2, number 7, action number 7 and strategy number 2, I think achieves this goal.
And number 2, so
Informational workshops
Action
on
2.
topics that impact
change
students.
it. Like,
I mean, you could
That's my
have it
question.
in both places. I think it's appropriate in both places.
I'm just trying to streamline how many meetings we are doing and what the purpose is. of this
I don't
one.
think that if it shows up in strategy 1 and strategy 2, that means those are additive, like that
Oh.
I think it's just saying that this same
Okay,
tool delivers against both of these strategies,
okay.
the focus, like a focus group or a town hall. Is that
yeah,
an accurate
Okay.
statement?
It's not implying that we're going to schedule like Board of Education to come to like 12 focus group meetings or 12.
Well, I'm talking also about managing expectations.
Yes, I
and parent
appreciate that. I
expectations.
appreciate
And
that.
so that's kind of the lens I'm also looking
Yep.
at, so.
I think Robin's right about that though, because I think her point is that the Board of Education's role is really more oversight of administrative issue of, what you guys are carrying out. And yes, there are times that we would participate in a facilitatory role, sort of helping understand maybe what our decision-making is and how that relates. But I do think fundamentally, most of what the public is concerned about are usually the issues themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're suggesting that strategy 1, action 5 should get
Subsumed.
struck.
Or
Striked.
incorporated in strategy 2 somewhere. Okay.
Yes, and it is incorporated in strategy 2. If we need to make it more clear there, that's fine. I've got a few things to talk about on strategy 2. Okay, so that's fine. Greg, you okay with that? Okay. Thank you. Strategy 2.
Just
More,
one second.
Yeah,
On,
sorry.
resources under strategy 1, the CABE document portal board book. Is that the ability to search, text search of like
It would provide that.
board
too.
agendas?
That's part of it, yes.
functionality.
Okay, yeah, because that would be a great resource for us.
Is that, I presumably that's part of the overall website overall,
Well,
Or no?
it would be,
but separate.
it wouldn't preclude, like if we didn't do anything else to the website, now it wouldn't preclude us adding this portal to it.
Oh, okay.
That's exciting. Okay, strategy number 2, more opportunities for two-way communication with all stakeholders. I think there are a few things in here that aren't actually two-way communications. And then I think that maybe we should talk through, might there be a few more here than we can reasonably try to take
Happy to
on?
have that. That's nice.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't understand how the dashboard is two-way. I don't see the community interacting with, the inputting. So if there's something I haven't understood about that, I'm open to it.
I think there should, like, should we consider on either, it's not necessarily the dashboard, but just generally with the website, like, if we want people to go to the website to be looking at information as like a primary source of information, like, should there be a place on the website, whether it be related to the dashboard or something else, where parents are able to go in and give feedback?
Oh, there could be some,
Or ask questions or whatever.
yeah, you could have certain portals or software layered on it that would allow, you got virtual coffee hours, there's different ways that board or administration can solicit feedback through that, but it has to be thought about carefully and.
With that, yeah, I mean, the concern obviously is if you have something where people are now easily able to put in questions and things, then now you have to have somebody who manages that.
Well, that's true too. And then you also have to be careful. You just don't want it to be
Yeah.
like
Right.
a complaint
The
board.
other way
right?
to, yeah, the other way to do it is to say, like, if you have questions on X, Y, on anything, like,
Yeah.
here's the point of contact.
Well, that's the chain of communication,
Right.
which the thing that makes me nervous about the idea of just having a general portal to ask questions. If you want an answer to your question, the fastest way to get the best answer is to ask the right person, right? So just kind of lobbing it out into the ether doesn't necessarily get you quickly or efficiently for purposes of thinking about
Yeah.
the district's resource employment efficiently to the right answer. So I understand that a website can be two-way. I don't think that that's what this is saying. I don't, again, see how the dashboard is two-way. So I would propose that
Can I-
that doesn't belong there.
Can I just, because in these strategies, there's not really another place for it. So what I would propose potentially is to say, we take out the word two-way here and just say, provide more opportunities for communication between or with stakeholders. Because I think in some area, we need to have that dashboard because that gets back to the best practices and research, which basically in the transparency and accountability piece said open communication about district performance and student outcomes correlates with higher family involvement. And so I think that's a really important way that we're trying to be more transparent and to show how the district's performing. And I don't see in all of these strategies where else you could put it.
Okay, and I'm not trying to make this a big discussion about the dashboard.
No,
because
no, I
don't
know,
think that's
I know.
appropriate for this morning. However, I think that
Or maybe it's a communication
part of my issue with the
tool.
dashboard is we haven't decided what its purpose is, which I think
Yeah.
is why we don't know where to slot it in strategically. So it's
It
a
could
lot
be in the
of different things
communication
discussed.
tool piece once
Uh-huh.
it's developed.
You have multiple
be.
tools that function like this. EduPlanet is another example of a,
Correct.
it's not technically two-way, but the purpose is an important form of communication. So I think maybe think about where you would put
Or strategy 4.
outbound communication.
We could have it in strategy 4, which is also where EduPlanet is because
Yeah,
it's
that's-
currently
Yes,
in development.
That's a good
We
suggestion.
could do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great idea. Okay.
Julie, I did have some other.
Yes,
comments on
please. I
this.
do too. Go
On
ahead.
the actions piece, and again, getting to the question of how often we're potentially talking about these, I would suggest potentially on action number 2, instead of quarterly town hall meetings, maybe we do twice a year, like fall and spring. Just to, again, because I think quarterly, I don't even know if in the fall, winter, spring, and summer, you're going to have parents attending at all of those, or that we'd have sufficient issues that we would want to discuss. So that's just a question. And again, to alleviate how many of these we're doing.
Well, this is a working group, so there's consensus, and I think invariably you're going to be bringing this to the front of the boards in some capacity. So if you want to change it, I'm happy to change that. I'm not going to complain about that.
Or maybe just take out quarterly and say scheduled town hall meetings and just leave it open. And it's kind of as needed as you deem appropriate.
What was like, so I had a question on this because it says we're board members. Is the idea that like all the board members would be at this? Then doesn't it technically count as a board meeting?
No, technically it doesn't, and
Doesn't, okay.
so it depends what way it's structured, right? Once the board members are there, right? And the participation, so it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to have all the board members there. Like you could have 1 or 2 representatives there on a particular topic or something. It doesn't have to be everybody. If everybody is there, then it depends on how the board engages in a discussion or doesn't. So when it says board members, it's not saying like a full board. It's just not precluding their representation either.
So there could be a town hall meeting where you and Jill as chair were discussing the topic and board members could be in attendance, but
But
we're
we've
not.
had that.
Right. I'm describing what has happened before.
Gets
So
messy, but we have it.
We
We've had
can
it.
be in attendance and it doesn't make it a board meeting because we're there.
No, that's what that's kind of what I
Yes.
was just trying to
Right.
figure out is how that would be
Oh,
structured.
that's a good point.
If
right.
we all went up and
There's
sat at
a-
the table
Yeah,
and
right.
engaged in the discussion,
Right.
that would be a different animal.
You're
So
I was
right.
kind of like, are we basically just adding another board meeting?
No,
That's,
you're
No, we're
not
not
adding
going to,
another
we're not
board.
going to do that.
Four.
So I could leave that undefined, schedule town hall meetings. I could also live with 2 to 3 annually. I think a minimum of 2 is a nice goal for a year, so how do you guys feel about 2 to 3 town hall meetings?
I think it's more as needed. And I don't, I mean, I know we had one when about the principal, like new, needing a the Ox Ridge Town Hall, and that's the most recent example that
So
I
the
can think of.
Only reason I push back on that is because the reason we've decided that the town halls are needed is because there seems to be a desire from the community for more different forums to engage.
No, that's fair.
So that's where the need, and then we
Right.
had a situation where we needed to address something and it was a good way to quickly put something together and address it. So that's my,
Are we thinking that
Want.
these would be open to all levels, like high school, elementary? I mean, it's just open.
probably, I mean, anyone could attend, but
Yeah.
the topics might be, I would think, more relevant, more
Well,
interesting to
it
some.
actually depends what the topic is.
Yeah.
Whether it's, I mean, anybody could attend, but
Right,
whether it's relevant for the whole.
right. But it would be
whole
open to
district,
the public for sure.
That's, I mean, that's kind of why I asked the question, because you could see like, yeah, some topics would be elementary school really care, others high school really cares. And so then it's like, all right, well, what topics? Like if you're having a regular meeting, I almost feel like it should be open to everybody. Otherwise, you're kind of cherry picking
Mhm.
which groups you're doing. And so that goes back to what Robin is saying is like, kind of need to know what we're talking about before we know the cadence.
Yeah, and also, what is what's the intended outcome, and are there action items that come out of that? Because then you start to get to basically, are we holding a Board of Education meeting where we're basically getting public comment,
Right.
where we're recording everyone that actually spoke? And so, I mean,
But it's a different animal when it's a
Yeah.
town hall meeting and it's structured as such and run accordingly. And I think that we can and should trust the administration to know how to assemble that and execute that when the time comes. I mean, and following the most recent town hall that we had, which was focused on Ox Ridge at the time, the superintendent did put out a follow-up message the next day, I think, that sort of summarized some of the key discussions and what
Okay.
came out of
Yeah.
that. So that was a communication from the super.
I don't think I would, for now, if you put in the annually 2 to 3, that would be enough without sort of handcuffing that it has to apply to the whole district.
Right.
Because it may, the topic may lend itself. I'd be happy enough to,
Do you see it as like being a recorded meeting? I think that's part of the reason why people don't attend these is because it is recorded and they're like, I don't want to.
I would say no to that, actually. Would I see it as, if we're going to have a town hall meeting, I would like people to show up.
No, I think that,
Person-
I actually think more people will show up
Right.
and more people will participate and more people will speak up if it is not recorded.
off the record.
Jill,
Yeah.
did you want to chime in?
I actually wanted to ask the committee if you consider the recent literacy presentation to be something of a town hall. There was a presentation first and then I believe, which was recorded, I believe they turned the cameras off and then took questions from the audience. And while it wasn't in the evening, so it was harder for some folks to attend. I did not go, but I know some board members
Yeah,
did.
I attended
Um,
that, and I think it was
So it's
really
just,
helpful.
it's just a question for the committee to consider. Is that a town hall?
I don't think I would consider that a town hall myself. I would consider that a
Number 7.
informational workshop on a topic that impacts students and parents. And the difference, the way out, but first is how it's billed. I think a town hall would be really kind of as a town hall, we're going to have a town hall on this topic. And I think a town hall is more about listening than it is about talking, whereas an information session is more about putting out information.
Okay.
But I think that was a good clarification to get to. Okay, so 2 to 3.
I'm okay with that. That's it.
Okay.
And I had some other comments, and this was the first one. So, but the brown bag
Yep.
with chair and superintendent. Again, just thinking about your time and the chair's time and how many meetings we already have.
So I put this in because there was a desire, various stakeholders to have, between board and so on, like having it with full board is just not appropriate. Having I'll call it a brown bag lunch or a brown bag occasion with some stakeholders, with myself, and I put down the board chair because it seems the most sensible thing to do. I think that's more manageable, more realistic.
So this was your ad to include.
Well, this is my add to the desire to have communication
Okay.
between the staff, parents, right? To this communication with the board. That's the way
I think it's a good idea. I think there should be more communications that aren't in this setting, in front of the camera, where you
Right.
can actually
Right.
have conversations and discuss key topics.
So that could be staff as well. I guess that
is
part
staff.
I didn't really
That
think.
includes staff. That's what,
Yeah,
consciously,
That's
that's
a
what
good
that
point.
is.
Okay.
Okay. And Alan, so I know that there used to be kind of during budget season, for example, you would go around to the schools and have a
Yeah.
lunchtime session with interested parents or whatever
Yes.
on what was in the budget and what the discussions were. Does this make that happen at a more macro level? Like, is this actually a little more efficient if you could use this to speak to a larger audience more intimately?
It could replace, it could complement, it could,
Okay.
either or, yes.
Okay.
Maybe that's certainly a topic that we.
Yeah.
So like if the PTOs were reaching out saying, could you come to our school? Could you come to our school? Could you say, well, why don't we all meet at the library and we'll have a brown bag lunch, and invite
Correct.
invite all 5 elementary schools, parents, or
No,
what
yeah,
have you.
we got,
Right.
that'd be more efficient
Those
for my
were
time.
well attended in the
Mhm.
past when they used to do those with the budgets. Yeah, I think those are excellent.
Just it doesn't all, these don't all have to be incremental
Right.
things to the schedule.
The way it's played out in the past, depending on where the interest topic, last year was the middle school, but it could be, in any given year, we could be putting them all together. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
As appropriate. And I think it's appropriate that it's not more specific what's in here. So, okay. Anything else in here?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So number 5, the digital platform, podcast, video, social media. So first question is who would be doing that and creating that content and maintaining it? Because this, again, I think this is a nice to have, but given our resources right now, my question is really, this is a lot if you're going to really commit to doing it.
So I have it, I have taken it off last year because from
Okay,
our earlier conversation.
okay,
B, if it were to be, it would probably roll into how we construct our communications personnel some way, somehow.
right.
Mhm. And it says you're going to explore them anyway, not that you're going to do them, but I understand that
yes,
still
yes.
takes resources.
So
Um,
from here this morning, I'm just actually taking that whole thing out.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm down with that.
okay.
Number 6, I have a similar question about resources,
Yeah.
summaries of board meetings, et cetera. Who's doing that work? Because the summary of board meetings doesn't presently exist.
There she is, she's walking in.
Marge is writing
This was
summaries
her,
of
this
board
was her,
meetings.
this was one of Marge's suggestions here, number 6.
Strategy 2,
I
number
actually
6.
volunteered, just saying.
Okay, so write a summary of board meetings. Great. District performance,
Now, that's not a set of minutes.
understood.
So with the question though, could that be construed as a set of minutes and does that open up potential issues for us? Because we don't include minutes currently
No,
in
only,
that form.
only unless the board wanted to be minutes, I don't think you do. That this would just be informational, just summary of what happened at the board at a very, very high level.
Yes, well, that's getting to my question. Is this, we discussed this, and this, because that's basically what's on the agenda. And if you get into further detail, there is opportunity for editorial license in terms of how people might construe what was discussed. And so I think,
We don't, Marge, appreciate her volunteering, but she also doesn't have the time to do a dissertation on this.
okay,
This will be extremely high level. Like, I don't know, like the middle school schedule was discussed, it was moved to the next meeting for further discussion, or we discussed the teams and this and this. I mean, it's just going to be.
Okay.
Slightly more than what's in the agenda,
Yeah. Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
where to look next.
And if there's
right?
an outcome,
Which
there's an
would be very
outcome.
helpful.
yeah,
I mean, if it's just a list of key follow-ups, that's to me is the most valuable.
Or next steps were what?
Next steps, like that, yeah. Next steps, key
Decisions,
follow-ups.
next steps.
A summary of the meeting. Unless, yeah, to Robin's point, unless there's like a lot of work to be done in that, which it doesn't sound like we want that to happen.
No,
It's a resource issue,
okay,
which I agree with. To me, it's kind of what I think I've brought it up a few times. It's like, who's keeping track of the next step deliverables, and they come up, every few months as we bring the topic back up, and then making sure that those get done and all
Yeah,
that. I think
right.
that to me is what that should be.
And our minutes will still be our minutes, and they'll still, and they satisfy the requirements of the minutes, and so that we'll still continue with the legally required process.
Yeah, the
of
minutes are
drafting
like
and posting.
A check the
Right.
box, it
Right.
seems.
and then
Um,
the district in progress towards strategic goals. I mean, Dr. Adley, I kind of think that what you do in your weekly communication
Yeah,
also
some of that,
addresses
yeah,
that.
we have
Yeah.
like, in the past, I've gone through each goal one by one. I've gone through, I don't know, the
Right.
division of graduate one by one. So like I see that.
Okay,
Just being able to manage that.
Okay. 7, we do.
Yep.
And we'll continue 8. Newsletters. we don't do newsletters from the superintendent presently, correct?
Correct.
Have you been sitting in your office thinking I'd love to write some newsletters?
No.
That makes me a little bit nervous. We have a history of putting out kind of glossy, fabulous reports from different departments and what have you that I think were not, I think the click-through rates were a little low on some of them. I'm nervous about promising regular newsletters from the superintendent and the individual schools.
Okay, let's take it out.
Yeah.
Because we haven't done, like, even updating on strategic plan and goals and stuff, I may have to
Yeah.
get that covered shortly.
I think we're adding enough already that I'd like
So-
to see how it moves the needle as far as satisfaction
Yep,
with communications from what we're proposing.
Agree.
Okay, thank you. So we'll lose number 8. I kind of love 9, and I'm not totally sure where the time is found for that. Is that a board meetings, Dr. Hadley? Students presenting their learning, provide feedback.
If there are other opportunities for them to provide that in other forums, yes, but the board meetings would be,
I mean, students could be invited to a brown bag lunch also, couldn't they?
they could, yes.
Okay. So I like that, and I don't think it overpromises a set schedule of doing this 6 times a year or anything, but I think to take the initiative to look for those opportunities is a great inclusion. And then the communication survey, I think, is a great idea.
Just given the fact, like, how do we continue to
Annually,
monitor,
yep.
making progress on it?
Yeah. Okay. Everybody good to move on to 3?
Oh, just one thing, the resources district dashboard development, which is down at the bottom of this one.
It's going to
Would you
4.
just move that over to,
Board, yeah.
number 4?
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So communicate and celebrate the achievements of Darien Public Schools students and staff. I think this felt solid to me.
One question. Who would do action number 3, developing the press releases?
Refer you to resources at the at the bottom of the page.
Well, potentially, like, we've touched on this before. Certainly, no matter what, like, a resource, some sort of resource, or when it says there, the position, it says a position, part-time position, but or some reorganization to get to that position or not. It doesn't imply that it has to be like a 0.5 FTE added. We could be an offset somewhere or otherwise. But invariably, listen, a half-time person could be filled nonstop here, sharing good things about what's happening in the district, with all constituents, outreach into community, businesses, celebrating kids' work, like,
Yeah.
creating the stories and the narratives. I mean, that's responsive to, like, any incidents and stuff that occurs. I mean, you can.
I think it'll be helpful when the full board discusses this to understand kind of the scope of what's doable with and without finding resources to allocate directly, because certainly all of this happens to some degree presently. And it could happen to a larger degree if there were more dedicated resources for this. Like we talked to facilities the other day about the sustainable kitchen. If we had somebody who could be writing a press release about that and getting that into the news, that's newsworthy. But it falls down on the priority list to get that news out to the general public when you have as many things to deal with as we do.
The other thing is this doesn't say by omission, and it's self-evident, right? Is the timeline that we're talking about for any of this.
Mhm.
Like, this isn't just magically going to happen this year, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, this can be the timeline for these things. This is going to be ongoing.
But I think it's valuable to capture it here, that's something that needs to be considered. If we want to do all these things as well as we possibly can, then we need to be thinking about finding some resources for it.
Just one question. I know some of the school principals, I know Ellen Dunn every now and then will send out something about, DHS happenings. And I think the school principals do try to highlight some of the student accomplishments and achievements. And same thing with the performing arts and arts. They had created a website when we did the certification that had students' artwork included in it. And so I think to some extent in the near term, without having to hire an additional person, we could just try to ensure that, the department heads, or maybe even the department chairs too, can kind of highlight some of the student achievements in their specific areas. Or, whichever team kind of accomplished this. And just to kind of make sure that we're always thinking about not only the student highlights and achievements, but also staff
Yep.
when they send out communications to parents.
I think that's great. And again, that's what a lot of that hopefully comes out of this, just by being deliberate, right? And
Right.
saying that that's our focus. We're going to do these things. So I totally agree with that. All right, cool. Strategy 4, improve district communication through evaluation of current systems. We added the dashboard here. I have any on this? I didn't. Just to jump to resources, Dr. Adley, the Aspen training, that's for staff.
Yes,
That's
correct.
not parent training.
Yep. Is that a wee touch of sarcasm there?
No, honestly, that's, as I've said before, I'm so well versed in Aspen at this point. I
By the
could
time-
probably run some
By
trainings,
the time you're a
but
senior in high school, you know
Right?
how to do it.
I'm
right?
like 15 years into my Aspen experience. So, it's all good. Anybody have any questions or comments on number 4? I'm sorry, also expanding access to EduPlanet. That dollar amount is for expanding it to the public.
Well,
To
it
make it-
includes opening it up to the public, it
Okay.
includes licenses for all the staff.
Okay, thank you.
That's an ongoing cost, right? Like it would be every year.
I have to check. I think it is, yes, the license for it.
And then for 5, plan for emergency communications to ensure safety, timeliness, and clarity. Again, being very careful here, we do plan for
Right, so
emergencies
it's,
always.
so one of the questions was to put this in, right, because are we a plan? We don't, we do, but we are continuous improvement in areas of, like, certainly communicating in an emergency is important. So how are we doing that? Is there anything we could do differently?
Right. And make sure that everyone knows
Some of
that
this
it's
is,
deliberate.
some of this is, has been done to some degree or another, actually. So it's not as if you're starting from scratch from this.
And then I think that's a good inclusion. Okay. Evaluation criteria.
Now, these were only cited because I was thinking, what type of thing would we use? Like, so it's, I mean, it's generic, but it just
Mhm.
happy to.
I think these are good. I think it's important to have evaluation criteria, and these are solid and built on what we have. So if we're increasing the attendance, that means, of course, we have to be tracking attendance. I'm not sure that we keep track of that historically, but moving forward, brown bags or town halls or what have you. Anything else?
Just one, I think maybe this is on number 6, that like you did in the earlier piece about looking at the number of attendees at the Zoom and YouTube for the Board of Ed meetings is
Yeah.
part of this as well,
Correct.
but it's not specifically mentioned. So it's similar to the increase in
that's what it would
website
be.
traffic usage, but it would be,
Yeah, that's
making
what
sure
it is.
that
Yeah, that's
people
what it
are
is.
participating.
Perfect.
You have a lot of talk about newsletters and emails up higher. But on number 6 is the only time you're looking at an increase in views, and that really is more board specific. Are you intentionally leaving out views and downloads of administrative communication, or is that?
No, I just tried to put without getting too extensive, from the list being too extensive, but it's clear, if we think that we should be monitoring another area somewhere, that's fine. No, this wasn't preclusive to this, but leaving something out specifically.
I didn't read that as being only board key documents. I read it as board meeting minutes because we're the only meeting minutes right out there, but that budget reports or other key documents would be anything district related potentially. I don't know that that's the right read.
If you're talking specifically like how many people would download superintendent's communication or something else, that's not really talking about that.
Yeah, because that's not going to be a download anymore. That's going to open right up when we click on it. You
But
just
I-
fell into that, walked right into that trap.
I think tracking the efficacy of administrative communication tools is fairly critical. So I think there needs to be a metric that reflects that. I appreciate what you're saying, Julie, that key documents could encompass a lot of things, but I think we need to be a bit more specific given the level of specificity of what's specified beforehand.
Can you give an example of what you mean? Like we just scratched newsletters, so that's not in here anymore.
Well, you didn't because it's up 2 bullets above it in newsletters under Marge's potential stuff. So I think what I'm saying is we have a lot of different forms of communication that are principals, superintendent, potentially what if Marge would be doing something sort of central office. And I think it's important for us to identify that we're tracking the success of what's coming out of our individual buildings, central office down.
So click-throughs,
Click
like
through.
opening the emails.
Opening an email.
Whatever metrics we think are appropriate, click-throughs I would think is part of it.
Yeah,
But if there's other metrics, I'm open.
okay. So I don't know what I mean, it's click-throughs and then when I say click-through, I mean opening the email. And then, I mean, because frequently in your emails, Dr. Adley, there's a link to a survey or there's a link to a report on SBAC results or whatever the case may be. So it might be the click-throughs to those.
I mean, like number 6, does that have to be limited to board meetings? But there's a couple of them that are kind of saying the same, like 5 and 6, attendance.
You could
Views.
you could change this a wee bit so that it's more inclusive.
That's what that's all I'm saying.
I'll
You can
do
just, like,
that.
Tweak it a
Will
little
we do
bit.
that?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll just.
yeah.
Um,
Because I think the goal with that is to just make sure that if we are sending out a lot of emails and no one ever reads it, then
Right.
maybe we
maybe
shouldn't
we should stop.
communicate in that way. Maybe it's not needed or, I think that's
Right.
helpful to have.
So I do think we want to make sure that we say that we're going to keep track of people that opening, I don't want to say click through because it sounds like you're downloading and attaching. So the opening of emails, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's all like even number 3 on here, increasing website traffic usage. I mean, one of the points of feedback was I don't want to have to click a link in an email. If you click a link in an email to go to the website, people just,
Right.
I don't know, like how else do you get people to go to the website without saying all the information, go to the website, they have to click to get there. I don't know.
I don't think that people have a problem with clicking a link to get to the next thing. I think that the issue is when it's, an email from Julie and you open it and it says, click here to download the email
download.
from Julie. And you're like 3 clicks in
Oh,
before
yeah,
you
well,
get
that's-
to the
yeah, that's-
email from Julie.
Yeah.
That's where people get frustrated, maybe myself included.
Yeah, and I think also with number 1, the communications survey ultimately should ask these specific questions. Where are you getting your information?
Right.
Is it the email from the superintendent? And I think some of the survey questions do get to that, but hopefully we would get
Yes.
more of that information that
Yeah.
way too.
And there are norms and
Yeah.
goals that you can set for people opening emails. Like there's, what's a reasonable expectation? Are we meeting it? Are we exceeding it? So that's a good way to have a simple read in one area. And we use email a lot. Okay, great. Anyone have anything else this morning? It's
Can
just
can we
thorough.
can we just talk about just next steps on
Yes.
moving forward and how we
Absolutely.
bring, we can certainly bring that, it sounds like there were only relatively a few, I appreciate people's diligence and suggestions. That can be made pretty quickly and easily. So what's the next phase in this document? Since it's a plan, obviously I think should go to the board for discussion and review.
It would be my recommendation that it go to the board for discussion at this point.
With the
And-
changes that we've made.
With the changes that we discussed today, I think the board's going to want a couple reads on it because there's a lot in here. But I think you want to get to the full board and get their input before it's any more final than
I
it is
agree with
right
that.
now, because that'll make it better.
So we've stated the obvious, we might as well wait till the full board is reconvened together as a new board. probably,
Correct.
right? So we'll talk with board chair and I can talk about when to schedule it on, but that's the next intent here.
That sounds great.
And thank you, Julie, for helping us to
Thanks.
organize
Bring
all
it to
of this. I think
closure.
this is
My
great.
pleasure. Yeah, I think this is going to serve the district well, and all stakeholders.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to public comment.
Good morning. If anybody in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Please state your name and address for the record and note that you have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have nobody in person and no raised hands.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Greg? All in favor?